You're listening to WCOM LP 103.5 FM Carborough and Chapel Hill. It's a Tuesday, it's 5 o'clock, and that only means one thing. It's time for another round of Snarky Faith with your host, Stuart Deloney. This is a space where we irreverently wrestle through life, culture, and spirituality, all with our heads in the clouds, our tongues in our cheeks, our hearts in our sleeves, and our feet on the ground. At Snarky Faith, the questions or even the answers are never the point. It's all about the conversation. So here's your host, Stuart Deloney.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to another round of Snarky Faith Radio. I'm your host, Stuart Deloney. And hey, guess what, guys? I know. People often feel like I'm the wet blanket in the American Christian Party. But somebody pissed on the blanket. It's not me. I'm just holding the wet blanket. That's how it works. But I wanted to talk to you about this one. This will not encapsulate what we're talking about today. Well, actually, it may kind of. But this is kind of one of those situations where you hear this and realize that people paid for this study. And then you will shake your head like I did. Shake your head, roll your eyes, sigh, get super sarcastic and snarky. That was my reaction to it. Henceforth, I will give it to you and also give you my reaction to this. So this comes from an article in the religionnews.com, and it's called "A Strong Link Has Been Found Between Worship Attendance and Religious Giving." Wait for it. If the title wasn't obvious enough, and the title wasn't a spoiler enough for the article, I'll just unpack this ever so briefly. They start the article by saying this: the more frequent a household attends worship services, the more likely its members donate to religious institutions and give generously. New research shows. It's what about like logic and reason? But let me continue. They said most strikingly, those attending religious services once a month or more make an average annual religious contribution of $1,848, while those attending religious services less than once a month donate $111, says the report from Giving USA. Yes, this report was released last week, October 21st, and is drawing data from the University of Michigan's philanthropy panel study. So, get this. If people don't go to church, they don't give to church. I know. This is mind-blowing. I'm just kind of so amazed that somebody had a study that showed us this. So if you go to church every week, you're more likely to give at church, which honestly, I would have never pondered that thing before. But if you think about it, the more I go to the movies, the more I give to the local movie theaters around here. If I don't go to the movies, guess what? I don't give them money. That's really how it works. I mean, it's weird. Who would have thought these kind of connections could happen? Who would have thought this was possible? Who would have thought that this would be so incredibly logical and common sense? I'm so glad they came out with this study and have a much larger article that they continue to unpack the minutia of what they've discovered. So yes, people that don't go to church much don't give to church much. So there you have it. Be shocked, be in awe, but be something. But no, when I read this, I was just like, oh wow, really? So what is the next study that they're going to run? Water is wet, the sky is blue, unless you live in Los Angeles. Great. That was one of the most obvious things that I have read recently. Besides the fact that Trump is a moron. That was already obvious. I already knew it. Was already there. Have already cried through this and dealt with this. But today, speaking of ineptitude, speaking of absolute ineptitude, much like that article, thanks, religious service, for painting something that's so obvious. 1 + 1 = 2. Who knew? But we had a survey that proved it. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Let's start talking about this. About how the evangelical Christian faction, militia, sect, I won't use sect because it's too close to sounding like sex. And, evangelicals are afraid of that. Yeah. Homies, posse, I don't know, whatever you want to call them. But yes, the evangelicals are going down the toilet, metaphorically and literally. And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about how misguided politics has made the religious right. How much it has made them crazy, insane, and running off the path. It was like total right-hand turn, like path. Here's what you're doing, walking after God, straight path, right? I'm not saying everything's straight path, but it meanders. But it's kind of like, I'm heading north. And all of a sudden the evangelicals are like, no. We need to go like either way, we need to go east or west. No, but like where we're going is north. No. We've got to take a hard right turn here. Why? Why would you say? Well, all because of Trumpy. And this has been something that has been coming on for the past 50 years, where the religious right, starting with our own Jerry Falwell Sr., may he, well, I would say rest in peace, but I really just don't give a crap. May he lay in the ground and stay dead and not be undead, because a zombie Jerry Falwell sounds pretty scary. Really does. It's like can you think of like a zombie preacher? I mean, there's plenty of them right now that technically still have a pulse. It technically still have a soul. That don't technically have morals at all. Yeah, there's a bunch of those out there. So let's start talking about this, about where they've gone wrong. And yes, we've had shows outlining like the rise of the religious right, which essentially was where evangelical Christians decided at some point the best way to influence the country, the best way to do this, was to hop in bed with politics, where their pursuit became more about power than it did about God or faith or Christianity or anything in a semblance of decency. No, those things, bye-bye. We really just want power. Power is the best way for us to mold or force our country into being whatever image that they think it needs to be. So that started a while back. And so why I bring a lot of this up is because what we can begin to see is the fulfillment of what they've been doing. The fulfillment of the path they started down about 50 years ago. The fulfillment of all of this is happening now with their orange messiah, Trump. And I would at least hope your messiah be a little easier on the eyes and less of a moron. But guess what? I guess, when you've committed 50 years of this, you'll take whatever messiah you can get, especially one that's been married 3 times. That seems little like any of the evangelical base that absolutely loves him. I mean, anytime you bring up Trump within that base, they get this kind of metaphorical spiritual hard-on when you hear people talk about Trump. Oh my God, he's bringing America back to its greatness. He's going to make it great again. And again, I've said this 1,000 times. So when was America great? At what point was it absolutely great? What point were we absolutely in a place that you could say, oh, this is the Renaissance of Americana. This is it. We have reached it. We need to continue to do what we did in this place. Yeah, we haven't, because we had genocide in our country. We have had huge racial divide, misogyny, a bunch of bigotry. Yeah, all of that. So I don't think we've ever really been at a point in our nation where we've been without those heinous evils that continue to rot at our culture. So to make America great again implies that something happened before, but also if you've ever read Trump's tweets or listened to the man talk, he doesn't really have a great grasp of the English language. I really feel like I want to spot him at around a 3rd or 4th grade reading level, because, I know he'll say he's a smart guy, but really listen to word choice. And I honestly think he's got about 100 words he uses and just recycles them and over. Okay, I'm digressing at this point. No, but this. Okay, and I'm bringing this to you because, again, I get great submissions from our listeners, and this one comes from Breitbart. I'm not saying it's the first time we've talked about Breitbart, or quoted it. It very may well be, mainly because I have a very short memory when it comes to these things. But yes, so here's the article, and this is going to send us down the toilet bowl. like this, spinning all the way down for the evangelicals. And apparently, you can still flush an evangelical down in Australia. It just goes the opposite way. Remember that? So when they're screaming and going down, it'll just sound in reverse, maybe, or clockwise, counter. I don't really know. Okay, so the article is this. Jerry Falwell backs Steve Bannon's efforts to oust, quote, fake Republicans and calls for an evangelical army to rise up and defeat them. Now, if I don't read anything more today, if I were to stop right here, just with that article, just the title of that article, does that not already tell you that the religious right is way off the map? They've lost the plot. They have no idea what their mission and focus is anymore. Or at least that mission and focus has nothing to do with Jesus anymore. Like, at all. Like, not even a scant. There's not even a crumb of Jesus in this. But yes, and let's continue with this. So they began the article, and I'll just go ahead and just directly quote this article. So it says, Jerry Falwell Jr., the president of Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia, and one of the most influential leaders in the evangelical Christian community nationwide, pause on the quote, that's probably debatable, but let me just continue. So he's one of the most influential leaders in the evangelical Christian community nationwide, is calling for evangelicals everywhere to stand with Stephen K. Bannon. Doesn't he sound way better than that? I mean, we already know what the K stands for, and I'm pretty sure I can say this. So this is like what? Like Steve Cockknocker Bannon? I'm not really sure, because that dude is flexible. But yes, Stephen K. Bannon against the fake Republicans in Washington, D.C. swamp. Yes, so that's like, I should start our show like I do every time. Welcome to another round of Snarky Faith Radio. This is Stuart Patrick Deloney coming to you live right now because I sound so much more, I don't know, I really don't sound accomplished, because anytime I open my mouth, you'd realize I'm not accomplished. But yes, so what happens is this. Okay, so we have Bannon, who was an instrumental genital wart on the Trump administration. Not the only one. But yes, so Bannon leaves, goes back to Breitbart News, and continues what he's calling his season of war against the political class in Washington, D.C. And as we're beginning to see this, especially in smaller races where, especially with the Republican Party, the more crazy your candidate is, the better chances they have right now, which talks about how fractured our country is and what a sad state we're in, where the most mad of the madmen out there somehow seem more credible to folks. I have no idea how that makes sense. But then again, we are living in Trump's America right now. So up is down, down is up. We're in the bizarro world totally right now. So yes. So Breitbart had an exclusive interview with Falwell Jr. And Falwell Jr. is coming out swinging. He's talking about how, he is backing Bannon 100%. And so I like this. And this is such a Trump thing, but it is a Falwell thing. So again, when I also mentioned about herpes, I really feel like this whole Trumpism is spreading like a sexually transmitted disease that, I don't know, makes you burn when you urinate and also somehow screws with your brain. So here, I love this. So he says this in the interview. He says, quote, this is from Falwell, I've coined the term fake Republicans. You get that? So, and he says there are 4 or 5 fake Republicans in the Senate and many in the House. If they can be replaced in 2018, the political class needs to go. If people can go out and find candidates like Donald Trump who have been successful in the private sector. Really? Successful in the private sector? I'm not too sure about that with Trump, but I'll keep going. So, yes, they want to find candidates like Donald Trump who have been successful in the private sector and go out to go out and primary those people. I guess primary those people. That's a weird verb there. But primary those people. And I'm talking about, I know it's not going to happen in Maine, but I'm talking about people like Suzanne Collins, Lindsey Graham, Jeff Flake, John McCain, Mitch McConnell, even the ones I don't. I heard someone on the radio this morning, one of Mitch McConnell's friends, bragging about how the Republicans have gone 95% with the Trump agenda. Well, 5% is always the issue. Okay, I'm just going to stop quoting him right here. But I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love how Falwell is in this interview is also saying, well, this is another phrase I've coined. I've coined the phrase fake Republicans. Well, can I coin a phrase? Let's talk about fake Christians. No, because the way the English language works, it's kind of really hard to coin a phrase unless you're absolutely clever. I know, the president has said, like, I started the phrase fake news. I've started the phrase prime the pump. So I think this is these are those things, when you look for symptoms of mental illness, symptoms of narcissism. I think when you have these people that have gotten to this place of power begin to tell you about the phrases they have coined, I think that should be in some sort of psychology journal. That should be one of those things. Oh yes, there is a symptom of this. But yes, I just had to mention that one. And so then they go on in the interview to be able to talk to Bannon to Falwell about Bannon's Seasons of War. And Falwell says this. He says, I love it. And he loves this idea that they are gearing up to tear stuff down because they are in a season of war. Which, when did Jesus talk about taking up arms to go and destroy people, to be able to force the world to be in his own image? This kind of sounds like the idea and the thing, really, when you kind of dig back into scripture, this whole thing that God kind of set in motion at the very beginning called free will, where God isn't trying to force people to mold them into his image. People have the ability to choose right from wrong. But, when it comes to the Christian church, we do like to try to force people to conform. It's a thing called groupthink. It's a way for us to identify who's in and who's out, who's a troublemaker and who's a sheep that we can manipulate. That's what they do. And in all of this, this guy, Falwell, if you don't know, runs Liberty University. And I know I make fun of Liberty in here, but it is a sizable university. They make a lot of money. A lot of people are going through its doors, whether online or physically, to get their education. I have a friend going through it, which I tried to tell him not to, because I also told him, honestly, I could save you 4 years of this. Just stick your head up your ass and step into an echo chamber and you'll be fine. But he didn't listen. And this continues. But I digress on this, saying that simply this is a leader of a Christian university that also has political power and sway. And his idea of what we need to look like as a Christian nation is that we need to look more like Trump. Really? Really? What? What? Where is God in any of this? And he just goes on to just continue to rage over and over about how there's fake Republicans out there. And I've heard this in the church. Anytime you've seen this, and these are, I'm talking about on micro levels, on the individual church campus, in an individual church, where people will say, if somebody doesn't agree with the pastor, they'll be they'll start questioning them. Oh, I don't know if he's really a believer. I'm pretty sure he may have some secret sin in his life. Or whatever. So again, it's this conformity, it's this uniformity, it's this thing that you have to be like this or you're out. Which I'm going to go ahead and call a foul on that one. Essentially, if we're talking about Christianity, know that God always speaks about there being a room at the table for everybody. And he doesn't say you have to go make sure that you have done X, Y, and Z to sit at this table. He's like, no, there's a seat here for you. But not with Jerry Falwell, not with Liberty University, not with the religious right. There's no seat at the table for you. No, unless you do what we tell you to do and bend over and take it like you're taking it in a prison shower. That's where the religious right has gone. And there's so much irony in that statement. I don't even really know what to do with myself. But to see these people that would purport themselves to be a religious leader, getting them so deeply involved in politics, is so deeply involved with, like, Baldwell saying his champion, Stephen K. Bannon? Like, does anyone want to think that Steve Bannon is an archetype for anything besides, like, liver disease and hate? But no, for you as a religious leader to be able to continue to, like, be the fluffer for Steve Bannon, what? Like, what? Like, this is just beyond crazy. This is beyond crazy. And I'm not even really going to take pot shots at Trump on all this, because guess what? Trump is Trump. He's disgusting. He's misogynistic. He's bigoted. He's greedy. He's narcissistic. And a whole nother laundry list of adjectives that you can use to describe him. That's fine. We know he's a pig. We've always known he's a pig. Like, I don't think that any point, like, in the history of Donald Trump being in the social spotlight where people like, well, he's really changed. He used to be so mellow and tame. He used to have manners. He used to be able to have a command of the English language. No, he's always been a pig. He's always been disgusting. He's always been that guy. But now they took that guy and made him into their quasi-savior for American culture. See, that's the problem. As much as I have a disdain for Trump, the bigger disdain I have is for the evangelical church hopping into bed with them and completely throwing out any semblance of ethics or belief or morals in order to do that. They only wanted power. And since Trump continues to allow these guys to kind of hang around like Falwell, they're going to continue to suckle his many teats. And now I don't actually have any credible evidence that Trump has more than 2 teats, but I really don't want to investigate further and or see him with his shirt off. That would be disgusting. And so this is where we are at, America. This is where the church is at. And this is where the sickness happens. This is where the thing, do you ever have those times where you kind of want to throw open your mouth? This is that time. This is that time. Because I believe the American church, because again, I began with talking about giving. Because again, the church will perk up their ears when it comes to giving. If you've ever been in a church, they'll either have a building campaign or they'll have like a giving campaign. Oh, we've got to make sure that you're pledging to give to us for this next year. And we're really doing this to be fiscally responsible because we have to set our budgets and everything else like that too. Really, we just want your money and we just want to make sure you keep giving to it. Okay, so some observations here. So we have seen a steep decline in church attendance since Trump has been in office. People are leaving the church. Why? Because they're saying, if my church supports this fascist fanatic, I don't want to be part of this church for very good reason. And for that, I applaud you, folks that have walked away from it. Why? Because when the rot is that bad, sometimes you just got to get out. So there has been a decline in a lot of these evangelical churches. The religious right is like having their heyday in power, but the base that got them there, their churches are shrinking and dying. And like I mentioned before, when people don't attend church, and I'm not telling you to here, I'm just making a logical argument and a connection here. So if the churches need to exist by having people show up, and by people showing up means they are giving, but the trend that we are seeing is people are not showing up as much to church. Why? Because they are sick of the politics and they are sick of how American Christianity has become so political. Okay, so I'm saying this to where we're having all of these from the religious right. These people, they've come together. They're finally having their shining moment where they have access to the White House, where they are seeing the rise of their own political power. But the problem is, the churches are dying. So we've gotten one thing, but we forgot the other. That also was why we were here in the first place. The American church was on a slow descent towards death. And Trump has just kicked it up a notch. He's done it bigly. He's done that. And all the while, people like Jerry Falwell Jr. don't give a rip. Why? He's already wealthy. And him being in bed with Trump means he probably has more opportunities to make more money. So is he caring about really the history of the American church or where it's going or what's happened to it? Not really. Like him and like the Joel Osteens and all these other people, they really just care about themselves. And if you want to see that, I mean, just look at how Trump is and then look at how they're acting. Back at home, their sanctuaries are metaphorically burning, but they continue to press on. They've forgotten why they are here. And the church is slowly dying or being flushed down the toilet. Either one. So, with all of that in mind, I'll give you a few quotes to back actually what I'm saying. That was in a recent New York Times article. And I'll just give you a couple random quotes from that. So Richard Land, president of the Conservative Christian Southern Evangelical Seminary in North Carolina. Here in North Carolina. That's got to be fun. Can you imagine the fraternities and sororities at the Christian Southern Evangelical Seminary? They've got to really have amazing keggers? I don't know. So Richard Land has worked with Republican administrators dating from Ronald Reagan, and never has he felt his advice and input were more welcome in the White House since Mr. Trump has become president. Yeah. Furthermore, in that article, at the same, so they're talking about they're kind of going through this meeting where a bunch of evangelical leaders were meeting with Trump. In the same meeting, Tony Perkins, president of the Family Research Council, a conservative religious lobbying group, again a fun bunch, broached the topic of banning transgender people in the military. Mr. Moore recalled, also adding that some participants disagreed with his stance. But you begin to see this. So it's not simply that they have access to the president. It's the fact that if you whisper something in Trump's ear after you've given him fellatio, really just more like verbal fellatio, like, oh my gosh, Mr. President, it's such an honor to be around you. Oh, I've never been around such a godly man. Yeah, I totally mean this. But they're beginning to see that if they whisper something into his empty head, he does it. So again, they're getting what they wanted, but at what cost? At what cost? And so this next section really is going to come from, this comes from the Washington Post, and it's an article that they had published, it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago, called "Trump Says He's Fulfilled His Promises to Christians, but He Really Means White Evangelicals." And I'll just start by reading like the opening paragraph of their article. And it says, President Trump promised that if he got to the White House, he would restore conservative Christians to the place of prominence in America that they believed had been lost during the Obama administration. And months before, 80% of white evangelicals voted for Trump. He told attendees at the 2016 Value Voters Summit, he said this. He said, so let me say this right up front. A Trump administration, our Christian heritage, will be cherished, protected, defended like you've never seen before. Believe me, I believe it. And you believe it, and you know it. You know it. It's one of those things I kind of wish I was just Stephen Colbert and I could really do the voice. Maybe I'll try it again. So let me be... Nah, I really not going to do that. Yeah, I will. So let me say this right up front. A Trump administration, our Christian heritage, will be cherished, protected, defended like you've never seen before. Believe me, I believe it, you believe it, and you know it. You know it. And again, as I'd mentioned earlier, strong command of the English language. But the article continues on saying, and when he returned to the gathering this weekend, he told the group that in less than a year in the White House, he had delivered that promise. And he said this: I pledged that in a Trump administration, our nation's religious heritage would be cherished, protected, and defended like you've never seen before. And that's what's happening. That's what's happening. You see it. Every day, you're reading it. I mean, it's so hard to read his quotes, not because I'm really bad at impressions, but because, yeah, yeah, there's grammar, syntax. I don't even know where to go with that one. But yes, so he'd pledged that the Trump administration would would share, like, how do you even do that? Like, what is the action point for making sure that our nation's religious heritage, step one, will be cherished? How do you do that? Like, how do you have that as an action step? Make sure these things that we value, that most other people probably don't value, are cherished. Like, we are going to have laws all about cherishing things like being able to say Merry Christmas. I have no idea. It's like when he talks, I just feel like if like when people used to do this, and it was always dumb, but they would have like on their fridge, and if you have one on your fridge, you can call me dumb right now for calling you out. But they would have like all those like little random like magnet words that you could stick on somebody's refrigerator, and people would like, oh, that's so cute. I can make weird phrases and blah blah blah. I feel like someone has taken all of like these like little magnet words and put them in a bag and shook them up, and then Trump just like pulls them out, like the other than yesterday lunch turkey sandwich, and the like we know what words mean, but I just like when they come out of his mouth, like they don't really mean anything. I just feel like it's gibberish. But I'll continue with this article. So they're really highlighting this, and it's really interesting. So the president continues on with his accomplishments. I like how they put it in this article. They said the president ticked off many of the campaign promises he'd made. Now, I'm not sure that he's really done much else besides tick off more than half of the American people, many other countries, mainly the whole world. Fine, if the president is, he's done a good job at ticking people off. We can say that. I think they're meaning here in the article he's checking off his promises, but he has done if I can give him props for doing anything, he's found a way to marginalize, divide, and tick off most people. But these are the campaign promises that Trump was then highlighting in the speech. To protect the unborn, I have reinstated a policy first put in place by President Ronald Reagan, the Mexico City policy. And to protect religious liberty, including protecting groups like this one, I signed a new executive action in a beautiful ceremony at the White House on our National Day of Prayer, which the day made official. And amongst many historical steps, the executive order followed through on one of the most important campaign promises to so many of you: to prevent the horrendous Johnson Amendment from interfering with your First Amendment rights. Pause on the quote. Johnson Amendment is the whole separation of church and state thing, basically where if churches get too political, they can lose their 501c3 nonprofit status. Bad thing. We have a show on it. Hop on our website. You can watch all about that. Watch, listen, whatever. And then Trump continues on with this. The Department of Justice issued a new guidance to all federal agencies to ensure that no religious group is ever targeted under my administration. It won't happen. which is really kind of funny. When he says no religious group will ever be targeted under my administration, travel bans. Yeah. Yeah. So Trump just continues to go on and kind of give his own humble brag, patting himself on the back about what he has done. All of the amazing things he has done for Christian white evangelicals. And really, all he's really simply done is actually just, he did the duty and now he's flushing it. And the Christians all had part of this. The article continues saying that Christianity is a diverse faith with some of the fastest growing segments in America coming from ethnic minorities, whose concerns are often left out of the political conversations when discussing priorities of Christians. The Washington Post's Michelle Borson wrote about diversity last month. She said this, in a popular lingo, the word evangelical has often and wrongly been used interchangeably with white evangelical. That is due to the pollsters often lumping together white evangelicals because of their statistical similarities, their shared views, beliefs, behaviors, and also doing the same with black Protestants who could also be seen as evangelical based on their theological beliefs. And she's right. I do that. Generally, when I speak about evangelicals, I am talking about white evangelicals. I'm talking about the religious right. I'm talking about those folks there. But that is a very important distinction that she's making here. And what we're beginning to see here is when Trump is saying that he's doing this, and that's the point of this, that he is helping the evangelical voters. He is literally not helping the evangelical voters. He's helping his base, which, again, when you're trying to speak to anything of intelligence or nuance with Trump, all of those things will be lost. Did they vote for me? Yes. Then I'll do what I can for them. Did they not vote for me? Or are they black or Latino? Or are they homosexual? Then no. That's kind of how it boils down. But what if they believe? What if someone that is black, Latino, homosexual, what happens if their theology lines up with what you would say is textbook the evangelicals or evangelicalism? That's a hard word to get out. What happens if they line up to it? Well, that doesn't really get covered in that. And I know that I do this too. I know that I lump it into it because I am speaking against and towards a certain group. Really just the white conservative faction. Actually, it's just the white conservative Christians, which I don't have to say white because they basically are. They're the guys that are out there with tiki torches and on Saturday night and hanging out in churches on Sunday morning and praising God. That's how that works. And again, I mean, we're beginning to see this. We're beginning to see that at the same time, they're giving Trump what he wants. They blow kisses. They give him back rubs. They sound a lot like Harvey Weinstein in this situation. I really need to kind of walk away from that example. No, but as long as they are complimenting him, he will give them what they want. And that is what evangelicals find. White evangelicals, the conservative religious right, has wanted for so many years, and they have it now. Kind of. Like they have gained this thing that they have wanted, but they have actually let go of the thing that actually defined who they were and what mattered to them. And we are seeing this. And so this also comes from, I'll hop to this last bit. It comes from NPR. And this is an article by Jessica Taylor said, after choosing Donald Trump, is the evangelical church in crisis? I could have written that article for you, Jessica Taylor. You write the titles, I'll write the content. Yes, period, end. We're done. I mean, that's really just kind of where we're at. Yes. Is the evangelical church in crisis? Yes, it is. And she begins her article with this and says, when Donald Trump announced he would be running for president, he didn't seem like the obvious candidate for evangelical voters, given his multiple divorces, his use of crass language, and one-time admission that he never asked God for forgiveness. But nonetheless, he managed to coalesce 81% of white evangelical voters behind him. Let that sink in. 81%. Oh my gosh. That is disgusting. But her article, what she's actually doing is she's interviewing Stephen Mansfield, who wrote the book, Choosing Donald Trump, God, Anger, Hope, and Why Christian Conservatives Supported Him. And beginning to talk about, and in Mansfield books and his book, what you'll begin to see is how Trump tapped in to this deep anger, this deep hatred, this deep resentment that was going on in those circles. Mainly because we had a two-term African-American president. That was simply it. An African-American president that I will remind those folks out there that would be part of the whole white evangelical KKK, whatever else you want to... Yeah, those folks. Barack Obama is a professing Christian. So the fact that this group of people would say, he's the Antichrist, he's the devil, oh, look what he's doing to our country. Actually, he at least showed up in church way more times than Trump has so far. Let me think about it. When has Trump actually gone to church? Not that going to church makes you a Christian, but I'm just going to say, at least for the show of it as a president, Trump hasn't gone once. He's too busy golfing, which is important because apparently his place for finding serenity in God is on the links. He needs to be golfing to be one with creation and be one with God, or whatever that is. But in her article here that she's talking to Mansfield, and he's saying this, he's saying fear and anger both played a huge role in getting Donald Trump elected. And he says, and Donald Trump definitely seemed to be the champion of those two dynamics, those two emotions, fear and anger. I mean, if I'm watching the movie Inside Out, like I would really love to watch that kids, the Pixar movie Inside Out with Trump's brain, where it's only fear and anger, and they just scream at each other all day long and throw tantrums and look like an adult daycare center. Like that would be, I mean, I don't know that it would make good quality filmmaking, especially for children to go and watch. Or maybe you could show your bratty child this and say, this is what you look like. You look like this grown man that is only run by fear and anger, and that you could use that to shame your children into actually acting better because they'd be like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. That is that even a human being? Yes, it is. Oh, is that how I look like, mommy? Yes, it is. Oh my gosh, I've got to go. I'm having an existential crisis. I need to go and sit in my room in my timeout chair and really rethink everything that I've done up until this point in life. So again, maybe that would be a good thing that would come out of Trump. But in her article, she says this. She says, according to Mansfield, who has written about the faith of former presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama, Trump spoke evangelicals' language on many issues, which we've already highlighted the fact that Trump has a very limited vocabulary. So what does that say about evangelicals' language that you speak? That they, they only have their code words, and then they say amen after every, okay, never mind. The article, she's saying, Trump spoke to evangelicals' language on many issues. Trump promised to repeal the Johnson Amendment, which regulates political speech from the pulpit, and pledged to nominate a conservative Supreme Court justice to the bench, which he did with Neil Gorsuch, and many prominent faith leaders, including Liberty University's Jerry Falwell, shocker, and First Baptist of Dallas's Robert Jeffress, who's human garbage, also didn't just endorse Trump. They gave him their most... They gave him their most full-throated blessing and defense. Which again is a weird way to say what they've done for Trump. They've been full-throated. I'm not even gonna do that, but yeah, you can draw your own weird. Yeah, I went there. But the article continues. But the fervent support from evangelicals may come at a cost. Really? As they overlook the actions that could be taken as antithetical to their faith, including comments about women and race. What? There have been growing radical and generational divisions within the church, Mansfield says, and Trump's election seems to have brought some of those simmering tensions to the surface, putting they're gonna make me say this again, evangelicalism, I'm saying it wrong, but I don't really care, at a potential crossroads. Yes, we are at a crossroads. Actually, no, the crossroads were passed way back, but this is the kind of point where you're driving with your dad in the car and you're like, Dad, like seriously, we've passed so many crossroads. Please pull over and ask for directions because I know a U-turn is in order. I know we have to turn back. I know we were making great time, but you have no idea where we were going. And if you turn around right now, it will cost us less in the end. And that is the crux of the matter of where the evangelical church is right now. Prayer isn't going to fix this, people. Actually, growing a spine will fix this. Actually, making hard decisions can fix this. Being able to vote based upon what you feel like really matters should change this, especially if you are professing, I vote my faith. I just, when I go in the ballot box, I have to vote my faith. Because you'll hear people say that. And if you vote your faith, what are you doing now? Like, how is a vote for Trump voting my faith? I gotta go and do that. I just do it because that's how Jesus would vote. I have my, my WWJD bracelet. What? How would Jesus vote? What would Jesus vote? How would he do this? And at this point, when you ask yourself those stupid questions, Jesus would be like, "Oh, just screw this. Just nail me back to the cross and end this." That's what would happen. And yes, I'm going to hell for that last one. But I think there's a couple of key questions that she asked in this article, and I'll read a few of those to you. She says she's asking, do you think that the number of evangelicals and evangelical leaders that have backed Trump has done harm to their witness? And Mansfield continues by saying, I think it has. Yes. Really, really. I'm not making fun of him. I'm really just. There's no way to undertone this. I think that they are especially going to lose influence amongst millennials. What? And yes, they are. And who are strongly social justice oriented. And surveys indicate that a vast majority of them are very suspicious of Donald Trump. I know Mansfield is doing a very good job of being low key. Like, if you were to ask me that question, which is why they would not, that would not be the way I would answer that. And when I was asked that question, when I was interviewed for the upcoming documentary In God We Trump, when I was interviewed for that one, yes, my words were not so measured. But he continues on saying, you've got an unusual situation here where the leaders of the religious right are not only having to account to a watching world for why they compromise their religious message to support Donald Trump, but you are also going to have some blowback from the very people that the religious right is trying to reach, the very people that these pastors are trying to reach, the young people of color, etc. And I think they may have lost them, and in some cases permanently. Again, I'm circling back to this. I said it earlier. Mansfield is only because I only read articles that are going to, work in my own echo chamber. No, and agree with me. That's not what I'm saying. This. No, when you have sold your soul for all of this, when you've gone down that road, but at the same time, you need people to come in to your church to sing your bad music and put their money in the offering plates. This is not the way to do this. So what they are simply doing is, I feel like they're standing on the end of a gangplank, and someone has said jump, and they're like, no, I've got this under control. Can someone hand me a saw? I'm going to start sawing this gangplank because you're not going to tell me what to do. The church is walking towards its own disaster, arm in arm, and skipping and whistling along the way. And they don't see this. And because of that, my answer is, all right, do what you want to do. Free will again. Remember that back from Genesis? God gives people free will. Go ahead, have your free will. March towards that. Because you are going to choke on the power that you have so long fantasized that you would have. It's going to choke you, and it's going to kill the church. So, well done. I mean, if that was your goal all along, well done. That's like a little golf clap. Go for it. Yay! But again, I will circle back to saying this. As much as I have spent this last hour trashing the church, or that I do in many weeks, I will say this. When I return to the words and the teachings of Jesus, they've changed my life. They've made me a different human. They've showed me how to have compassion, and they have helped me to see what a life well spent is. A life well spent investing in the lives of other people. And investing in the lives of other people that aren't like me, that don't believe like me. That's good. That's good. So if all this facade needs to burn down, if all of this just needs to come crashing down, I'm fine with it. Because again, I continue to go back to who Jesus was and who he called his followers to be. And these guys, like, as much as Falwell was like, I coined the term fake Republicans. I coined it. Nailed it. It's mine. Trademark. I mean, as much as you want to sit around calling out people to be fake Republicans, what kind of Christian have you become? Are you a fake Christian? And I don't like doing this. I'm really just doing this for more just to point out his own hypocrisy. I don't want to sit around and try to judge people's faith, but I will judge people's actions, and I will judge it, especially when it is damaging to people, especially when it is damaging to people that are already hurting. And we're going to continue to see this because guess what? There's a huge generational divide amongst Christians, and millennials, Gen Xers have had enough of this. And the fact that Falwell and all these guys are getting a hard-on about trying to repeal the Johnson Amendment so churches can be more political, because that is what churches need to go and do, is be more political on a Sunday. And I'm being very sarcastic when I say that. The job of a church is to be able to point people to the wonder and mystery of God. It's not supposed to be something that is political. It's not supposed to be something that says you're in and you're not. It's not supposed to be about that. And at the end of the day, whatever the church has become right now, it's something that is not what was intended by God. Read the Bible. Go back to it. Or open it for the first time. But when you read through the Gospels of Jesus, Jesus talks about inclusion. He talks about crossing racial and sexual lines to be able to restore dignity to people. And anything that I'm seeing with the Bannons and the Trumps and the Falwells, they don't really care about giving people dignity. They really just want to strip it away. And I find that to be very sick and very sad. And actually something that I think that we have to be able to take our stands when we need to take a stand against. Now, I'm not saying, much like how Falwell was getting a hard-on talking about Bannon's army, I'm behind Bannon's army. I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying being people that are well-rooted in our community, that know people around us, and that care, that act out of compassion and grace. Because it doesn't really matter if you worship on a Sunday or where you worship on a Sunday, or if you stand up or sit down when you pee, or what the color of your skin is. God has an open table for people to come and be one with God at. Message of the gospel. There's room. There's always more room. Come. And we're not going to give you a checklist that you have to go down to be able to do this. Just come. Because God, if you read the Bible, and Jesus are compassionate, hopeful, believe in humanity, and believe that we can be better. But when we look at the way that the evangelicals and Trump have moved, they just want to tell us we can only be worse. And that's a very sad place to be. So yes, the leaders of the evangelical church are flushing it down the toilet. And I'll leave you with this idea. That may be a good thing. It may not be a bad thing. Sometimes you gotta clean the disease out for something to actually get better. And let these guys have what they want. Because they're really only just gonna choke on their own power. Hopefully. Please, Robert Mueller, please do your job. That's my hope right now. Oh, this has been a fun hour. Thank you guys so much for listening to us. Just a reminder that as I end this broadcast, that you can also catch us on podcast at www.snarkyfaith.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. Just look up Snarky Faith. I love to hear back from you guys. A lot of the articles that I use, I get sent to by our listeners. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for being a part of this journey, my own journey of catharsis with the microphone, because that's the only way I can survive. No, but seriously, go out there, be compassionate, be graceful, and do good. This is Stuart signing off. I'll catch you guys again next week.
WCOM is listener-supported community radio, and Snarky Faith is only possible through our sponsors. Aqueduct Conference Centre was established in 1978 as a peaceful destination for small group meetings, special events, conferences, retreats, and weddings. For more information, go to www.aqueductcc.com. We are also sponsored by Lumen. Lumen, A spiritual community of seekers, sojourners, question askers, doubters, and skeptics is a collective of fellow travelers that embrace the truth that all life is sacred, hope is real, and tomorrow can be better than today. All are welcome. You can find more information at www.lumencommunities.com.